Today we talk task-based learning. Hello and welcome to Teacher Learning Cast, episode number 24. Today is October 6th, 2018. My name is Benjamin Stewart, calling from beautiful Aguascalientes.
Good morning, everybody. This is Piry Herrera, also here in Aguascalientes. A fresh morning today. Hoping you are all finishing activities for this week, getting ready for the weekend. And I know many of you still teaching Saturday morning.
Yeah, we've got a good show for you today. We're going to talk about task-based learning and throw around a few other key terms that are fairly new to me. I think it's worth mentioning, maybe sharing some experiences that we've had with regard to task-based learning. But before we get into that, remember that you can be a part of this broadcast, not only the live show. If you want to be part of the live broadcast that we do every Saturday morning, you can find the link in our Facebook page. If you search Teacher Learning Cast, you can find that link, as well as all prior videos that we produce every week. And so feel free to leave comments, leave us some feedback if there are topics that you want to hear from us, or if you just want to contribute to the conversation, better yet, feel free to do that in Facebook and let us know how you view the show. And again, give us some feedback. We're always open to comments that you might have.
Right, we invite you to follow us on our social networks. We have mainly our websites and different platforms in which we have Teacher Learning Cast playlists. And I think the easiest way to go is just to Google Teacher Learning Cast Benjamin Stewart or Teacher Learning Cast Piry Herrera, and you will find a whole list of our sites and playlists where you can follow us and see previous shows, make comments, and find our contact if you want to email us or whatever.
Yes, and I just recently, this week, in fact, started putting up all of our prior episodes in a website called Anchor. And Anchor is a podcasting site which also pushes all of the podcasts out to various other platforms. And so feel free, if you're using a podcasting site, for example, Spotify, you can find, if you search the podcast in the classroom, you'll find all of the prior episodes in podcast form. This will be just audio only. So those are going to be for those who want to just listen to the audio. I think the best experience is to watch the video, because obviously there's a lot of things we're displaying. But for those who want just audio only, we're going to be making all of our prior broadcast available through those different platforms. And so I'll show you here. In fact, I'm not sharing my screen right now, but I'll show you here in a few minutes the website Anchor. But you can find us on, and I'm pulling it up here as I'm discussing it. Okay, here's the list of podcasts that you can find us on: Breaker, Google Podcast, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, Spotify, and Stitcher. So if you're already using some of those platforms, if you search for the podcast in the classroom, you'll find all of our prior podcasts from Teacher Learning Cast.
Yes, we've been discussing different topics this is episode number 24. So we've been having several topics along all these talks Saturdays morning. And you can go back, and if you want us to retake a topic, or you want to ask a question, or if you want to add yourself to the conversation, like covering once again some of the things we have seen before, we can do it. We can get into an arrangement in that and go back through prior topics. Lately, we've been discussing about reflection a lot, right? And today, I think we are going through an interesting topic, which is task-based learning.
Yeah, so let's dive right into it. And one of the things that sparked my attention this week was an interesting activity, Piry. In fact, you and our friend and colleague, Maestro Luis Humberto, who's also a tutor, an activity that you guys created for some of our students, and I'm trying to find the photo here because I had a really good photo. There we go. But you created this opportunity where you had first semester students that were just starting in the BA with our meet with our Prope students so that they could interact with each other and share strategies as to how to be more successful in Prope. And I thought that was a really good activity. And so I wanted to kind of piggyback on that activity that happened last week, or actually 2 weeks now almost. And I created an essential question for my Prope students this semester, for this week rather, that is as follows. What strategies can be used to be successful in Prope? So I wanted to...
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just for the audience that is not really familiar with our program, we do have a propedeutical year with the students who focuses only on language development, and then we start with what we call first semester, in which they start to prepare in all the areas, methodological and practical areas for actual teaching. So this activity was with the students that are already in first semester to give a little bit of support to the students which are just in the propedeutical semester. Sorry, Ben, go ahead.
No, yeah, and thanks for clarifying that. And the Prope year is basically divided into courses that focus on individual skills, right? So we have a class in listening and speaking, we have a class in reading, a class in writing, we have a grammar class, and we have a learning strategies class. So the students that are taking Prope this semester, I have a writing class that I wanted to have them share and write about the different learning strategies that they're not only learning in their other class this semester, but also any strategies that they discussed last week or the prior week with first semester students. And again, the first semester students were those who took Prope the year before. So the idea was to try to have first semester students give some insight and some guidance, if you will, to our current Prope students to perhaps give them some ideas about strategies. So this week, I really wanted to focus on my students to write about learning strategies for this week. So again, the central question for this week, what strategies can be used to be successful in Prope? This was the guiding question that we worked on throughout the week. And when we talk about task-based learning, I kind of wanted to take you through the process this week as we led up to having our students develop a paragraph around answering this one central question. And again, just to clarify, this particular course this semester, the objective really is to help students develop a paragraph, right? So they're not even writing essays at this point. They're really learning about developing good sentences and paragraphs in terms of academic writing or formal writing. So this was the topic. This was the project, right, if you will, for this week. And the idea was to, at the end of the week, have them develop a learning strategies guide. So let me take you to the first day on Monday, what we looked at. And I had our students, because I knew the idea of the word success. I was really kind of thinking about how students might interpret the word success, right? So I'm going to show you here. I've got a class photo album that I use that I share all of the board work and different pictures that pertain to the class. But let me show you on day one the word cloud. So the idea on day one on Monday was to really look at this idea about what is success and what does it mean to be successful in terms of this particular essential question. And so I had students think about individually key words that came to mind, kind of a word association around the word success. And so this word cloud that you see here on the board is really a result of students coming together from using their list and consolidating all of the different words that came to mind. Then we had a whole group discussion around which kinds of words might be might be better for thinking about what is success, thinking about some kind of term that can be measured, that can be observable, and not so abstract. And so we had a discussion, and you see here words like hope, optimism, hard work, goals, setting personal goals, actions, and so on. Some of these words came up. Organization was another big term. But I wanted to compare and contrast with some of our students about which of these words were more concrete than others, which words were more abstract than others, so that they could really think about what it is to be successful, so when they start thinking about their own paragraphs, they were more specific. That was really the end goal here, was trying to make sure that when they developed their topic sentences, which we weren't talking about on day one, that they would be more, they would have some terms, some words, some vocabulary that they could use that would be more concrete and more specific. So this was basically day one. And there are, I actually have two different groups for writing wine, and we both groups really came up with similar terms. In day two, on Tuesday, we started diving into developing the paragraph and working in teams. And just to give you an idea what this looks like, this is a picture of the classroom. In fact, this is a picture of a typical classroom experience that I have, where students were working in teams. We have, fortunately, we have technology here that we can broadcast and show on the big screen, the internet, and in this case, we were using Google Docs. And I also have on my iPad, I have access to the same document, so I can provide feedback here, or I can display it here as well. And so students can access the same document using their cell phones, and it might be hard to see, but many of the students have their cell phones that they're using to work and in real time contribute. So students were divided into teams of three, and they were creating their own paragraph. So each team created one paragraph. Each team of three would create their own paragraph around this one particular question. And on Tuesday, we started looking at the development of, let's see if I have a picture here. Should have one. This might be hard to read, but the students were to consolidate different reasons. They were looking at this prompt, subject plus verb plus because, and then students would list reasons. So students had to form an opinion about strategies using the connector because to list different reasons. And this is how they came together. They started creating this topic sentence based on that information. Again, the key terms that they talked about on Monday were to be used in this topic sentence that would create the main idea for their own paragraph.
Sorry, Ben, at this point, did you make any connection with the activity they had with the first semester students, sharing their suggestions and having questions for them the day they got together?
Well, yes and no. You know, thinking back on that, I didn't spend a lot of time. I did mention it. I asked them to think about their conversations that they had with first semester students, and of course any learning strategies that they were learning in the other course. But we didn't do a specific brainstorming activity based on strategies on those. What I wanted to try to do was to tie in any knowledge that they had with learning strategies to this idea of success. So I didn't really make that explicit, but it was kind of intentional because I wanted them, I was curious to see how they would articulate this word or interpret this word of success, and looking at how they would, would success for them be what, just being able to use a strategy, or would success be a strategy that led to something else that they would consider as success? Okay. So if that makes sense. So I knew time was also a factor because they really need a lot of time just in the act of writing. And so I actually spent a lot of time just on this idea of what is success, which was really a question that I kept coming back to the entire week, because as they were going through the writing process, they were still struggling a bit to articulate specifically what success was, and then the reasons behind that success. So yeah, that I didn't spend a lot of time on just drawing out those, simply because I knew, or at least I assumed, which it turned out to be the case, that they were going to struggle a little bit about this notion of success and what that actually means.
Okay,
So,
and sorry, Ben. And then you had with the stage of the brainstorming. Was that an individual? Well, I mean, it was a group brainstorming. But was that an individual process of thinking, or was that also pairs or groups?
yeah, so they started off as an individual. Let me go back to the. Let me go back to the brain. Yeah.
We're talking for the audience very quickly. We're talking about students who are in propedeutical year, which is a year only for the development of English language before starting everything related to methodology and actual teaching. But still, they do have this sample of strategies and different ways of teaching from our teachers. I mean, the teachers that are teaching them the language at that year.
Right. And these students are typically at about an A2 level, according to the Common European Framework, just to provide context there. But yeah, going back to this is another screenshot, in fact, because this is from the other class, but it was very, very similar, the words that they came up with. But this word cloud was done individually. So students were asked individually, what do you think success is? And what do you, what words would you associate with those? And the students really did two things. They came up with these words, these keywords. We had the whole group discussion about which words were quote unquote better, in the sense that which ones were more concrete, which ones were more specific. And then I did ask them individually to create one sentence with this because connector, or subordinating conjunction, so that they were to write a subject plus a verb, then this clause because, and then list reasons. So this was all done individually first. And I asked them to create basically two reasons to support their opinion, which again, the opinion would be the subject and the verb clause. So this was all done individually on Monday. Right. Then on Tuesday, they divided into groups of 3 or 4, and they compared their sentences. And since each student had 2 reasons as a group, as a team, they would have anywhere from 6 to 8 reasons total as a group. So I asked them, the first thing that they were asked to do was to consolidate those 6 to 8 reasons into 3 to 5 reasons that they could then turn into a topic sentence for their paragraph that they would be completing as a team, if that makes sense. Yeah, so they're going to be using the same sentence, subject plus verb plus because, and then their reasons, 3 to 5 reasons. So on day 2, they were to then consolidate that into one topic sentence, but decide as a team which would be the reasons, because each team member was assigned to complete 2 sentences for this paragraph. So again, they're working together to create one paragraph. Each team member is to complete 2 sentences. They decide who completes which type of sentences. But as a team, they must have a topic sentence. They have to have detailed sentences, and then they need a summarizing sentence at the end. And then, so they're choosing the reasons, they're choosing the key words, right, that are concrete and specific enough, right? And they're to then decide which type of sentences that they are to create in order to develop a unified, coherent, and cohesive paragraph. Okay, so that's then where the language came in. So on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, really, that's where we started digging into the types of sentences, how sentences are connecting and transitions, and just writing more coherently and cohesively. A lot of the discussions were related to language, but I was, I think, surprised a little bit about how much we kept coming back to the initial question of what is success, really thinking about which words can they use in order to be a little bit more specific, to be concrete, in order for them to create these examples that they needed to for this particular assignment. It's important to mention that students were also given this handout, this graphic organizer, where this kind of prompted them when they're developing their paragraph to make sure that they include not only reasons to support their opinion, but also examples. So this particular graphic organizer, I think, was good because it showed that the topic sentence that we talk about a lot is their opinion. Then they were to include 3 to 5 reasons and include examples for each of those reasons. So they used this graphic organizer. We used it in class in order to articulate how they were to then include several reasons and to make sure that they include examples. And that was another thing that we talked a lot about this week. I helped guide them to see really the difference between what is a reason and what is an example. Okay. And so that was another language focus for this week. But the thing here, tying it back into test-based learning, I came across an article that I think was really interesting, and it made me kind of think in terms of what I did this week with regard to what they refer to as instructional learning episodes. And they came up with 8 different instructional learning episodes, basically 4 categories. The first one being reproductive to productive, the second being knowledge and skill, the third being metacognitive and cognitive, and the fourth being far and near transfer. And let me go just quickly to kind of describe the differences here between these two. Some of them are pretty obvious, but the first one, reproductive and productive, basically the difference being a reproductive episode or task would be something where students are asked to memorize, or it's more of a type of rehearsal. So it's not really related to generating a greater awareness of how and when or why something happens. It's more rote learning, if you will. Okay. The second, knowledge and skill, is fairly straightforward. So just distinguishing between knowledge and skill. In our case, it was the knowledge of learning strategies. It might even be the knowledge of writing conventions, like what are transitions, what is a verb even, what is a noun, knowing kind of the declarative knowledge of language, as well as the learning strategies. And then the skill, of course, is the actual ability to write the paragraph and express one's ideas. Okay. Then we have metacognitive and cognitive, right? So the difference between learning how to learn versus just the learning activity itself. Here, using the graphic organizer would be a little bit more towards the cognition part and just the process of writing and the process of thinking and brainstorming would be related a little bit more to the cognition part. Metacognitive would be thinking about how they work together as a team, thinking about who's going to do what and how, and that thought process would be more in line of the metacognition. Far and near transfer is interesting. The difference there being near transfer would be students are able to use their current knowledge and skills in something that is very familiar with to them, so context that they're very familiar with, versus far, context that is new. Being able to have students adapt their knowledge and skill base into new context. And here, a lot of the things that we do or that we did this particular week was familiar to them in terms of working online, working in groups, and sharing and brainstorming. The new piece for this week, I think the context that might have been a little bit new for them, was to take this idea of learning strategies and the idea of success and try to really articulate that into some concrete terminology or vocabulary that could be understood. And so I know I'm throwing out a lot of information, PD. I don't know if you have some questions or comments at this point.
No, I'm having a clear picture of what you are going through here. Just I just want to maybe if you go on with this study of the article, it's okay.
Okay. Yeah, I pretty much the article is the one thing I just wanted to mention are essentially those episodes, these instructional episodes, without getting too much into the article itself.
Right.
But I think it's interesting to really articulate what task-based learning is. I like how they looked at these 8 different instructional learning episodes, because thinking back on my experience this week, I look at, there are many objectives, and I think that what I did this week with my students is considered task-based learning, but it's not necessarily like everybody's doing the same task at the same time, doing one thing to the next. That students really, some groups progressed faster than others. Every day, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, even the last day that the assignment was due on Friday, I would have very different conversations with different groups depending on where they were in the process. And so I think that, one of the things that I liked about this week was that I felt like students could go at different paces, different speeds, and based on their level of understanding and how they were working together. But it's not necessarily the case where everybody was actually doing exactly the same thing at the same time, and every class, every activity, everybody was doing the same thing. It was very much kind of a more fluid approach, I think, with students kind of asking questions. Like I would invariably go back to the first question, what is success? Even on Thursday and Friday with some students, going back to that as they were developing their paragraph. We would be talking more about language in some cases with some students when we're looking at transitions, looking at sentence connectors and introductory phrases and so on. So I think that this week was probably, and I'm waiting to get some of the feedback. Every week, these students also write in their reflective journal, so I'll get some feedback about how they felt about this week. But I do know that this was a challenge. I think more cognitively, really, than actually just the writing process. Just trying to get their heads around, again, what is success, and then distinguishing between what is a reason, thinking about that connector because, and then listing reasons, and then distinguishing reasons with examples, with concrete examples. And those examples really was the whole point, getting to the learning strategies, right? So the examples, we kind of worked backwards instead of really focusing at the very beginning. This is kind of going back to your question about well, how did you connect students, what they were talking about with first semester students. I'm hoping, and this is something I want to see, is how they connected those conversations and what they know now about learning strategies, what they've learned so far this semester, how they brought those into the examples and for this particular exercise. And they're doing that, right? They're doing that, but I didn't make it that explicit. I wanted them to think in terms of, again, this idea of what is success, and then reasons, and then examples, and just have them kind of draw it out of them, so to speak. And I think that I think it's been successful in that case, right? I think they actually struggled more with just the concept of success and really, again, trying to formulate and organize their ideas in a coherent fashion around an opinion about success.
Right. I think you're covering many aspects in here. As you mentioned, it's a lot of information, but it's given us a picture of precisely how to handle this task in the classroom. As I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, precisely that's one of the objectives, one of the main characteristics, but at the same an objective for task-based learning, which is that students themselves bring up what is to be learned. the specifics about what is to be learned. And this, what you mentioned, that they work in different things at different moments, different levels. They bring up different concepts, different ideas, different learning strategies at the end, which was part of the objective. This gives me the sense that it's kind of being successful. We will wait for the feedback from students, but anyhow, I think that's precisely one of the characteristics. As I understand, the main difference is from traditional teaching, which we can go through the idea of presentation, practice, and production, is precisely that. From that view, presentation, practice, and production, the teacher is the one that just states the language or the aspects that have to be learned, and then in the practice they go through control activities till they get to freedom, but based precisely on the prior presentation, which is teacher's statement of what is to be used in the classroom. And that's the main difference with the task-based learning, which is where the teacher focuses mainly on the task. Obviously, it has to be a well-considered and thought task, so that it focuses on the objective precisely for the course, or the different aspects of the course, and then start having students work on it somehow with the support and guidance from the teacher himself, but let them responsible for whatever is to be learned and developed in the specifics. Transferring this idea, this requires a wide view. This requires the teacher to be really understanding what it's where classes are heading, not a class, but classes. Maybe a part of the course, maybe one of the objectives of the course, maybe one segment of the course, but it requires precisely a good control of a wide view of where we are heading. The other aspects that I see from what you mentioned is flexibility. It requires a lot of flexibility in the sense that time and organization may vary a lot, since the students may have, as you mentioned, different paces, different strategies actually to go through the task itself. So I think it looks like a good example of task-based learning in that sense. And but I will wait also for the comments from students, because I don't know how familiar they are with this kind of approaches.
Right, and I also looked. You mentioned PPP, right? And I did come across the British Council. They have at www.teachingenglish.org.uk. They contrast, in fact, task-based learning with some problems, typical problems that are associated with PPP, or presentation, practice, and production. And they mentioned here some of the problems with PPP being that students can give the impression that they are comfortable with new language as they are producing it accurately in the class. Often, though, as few lessons later, students will either not be able to produce the language correctly or even won't produce it at all. The second thing they mentioned is students will often produce a language but overuse the target structure so that it sounds completely unnatural.
Exactly, yeah.
And the third thing they mentioned, students may not produce the target language during the free practice stage because they find they are able to use existing language resources to complete the task, which I find is interesting. They might, how much do we know, when they're actually producing that what they're producing was what they just learned, or did they already know that?
Okay.
And so I think that it's important to, and especially with teacher training too, is that students are aware of these other approaches, problem-based learning, task-based learning, that they are experiencing some of these and testing and trying these out, so that they don't necessarily all gravitate to this PPP approach and thinking in terms of kind of a more linear approach to language learning. But I think that there's many aspects here of this week that came to mind that I wanted to share. I'm not going to be able to share everything here, but one of the other things I wanted to mention was also the way in which I gave feedback to the group, because it kind of morphed and emerged throughout, which is common, I think, in a lot of the things that I do with my class. But The the one thing, let me show you two things here. One in Google Classroom. I
Mm-hmm.
think this was on Thursday. I'm going to go to the stream here, and I created a video
Mm-hmm.
of an example. In fact, so I created a paragraph. I did the assignment just as my students were doing, and um, I'm going to just show you a clip because I know it's going to be a little bit problematic, I think, to show this video in doing a Google Hangout. But I wanted just to give you an idea about what it looks like. But I basically did an analysis of the paragraph that I created. So it
Okay.
was um, kind of a think aloud exercise where I'm basically reflecting and explaining what I did and how I did it, why I did it. And so if I just want to show you a part of the video. So I basically did a screencast showing the actual paragraph, and then you'll see here where I have annotations. And it's taking just a second here because my internet's a little slow here, so bear with me. But here you see a list. Okay, I don't know if you can see this. You can
Right.
see some of the notations there.
Yes.
So I've circled using different colors and talking about different aspects of the paragraph, trying to explain what I did, how I did it, and basically showing them what they ought to do with their own paragraph, how they can analyze and kind of see if they're doing what they need to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I provided this example as one way of kind of guiding them. And we didn't really talk about it in class, but I made it available in Google Classroom, asking everyone on their own to watch the video. And
Right.
so that was one way of providing some feedback as to the whole group, looking at the different aspects of the paragraph and really zeroing in on what I was looking for their own work. So
Right.
that was one thing that I did. And then throughout the week, let me go back to the pictures here. I would I would write up on the board certain things, certain aspects to either avoid or to include based on what they were giving me, basically. So I didn't really give them a lot of information, and a lot of this, in fact, everything that we talk about, everything you see on this, like avoid contractions, avoid the verb to be and to have in the topic sentence, um, mention prope students, state the reasons and examples. But many of the things we've talked about all semester. A lot of the language things, especially comma usage, the punctuation aspects, capitalization. So a lot of the things are repetitive, which is fine. That's part of the process. We kind of recycle some of the feedback topics, the things that we look at and need to correct. But I didn't, the students know they've heard a lot about what they should and shouldn't do, but it's almost this they need to go through that process of recycling and that's just part of the learning process. But the main thing I wanted to stress in this exercise was the use of vocabulary that
Mm-hmm.
they really produced or created as a group, the vocabulary from the beginning, again on Monday and Tuesday. And we pretty much stuck to that same vocabulary throughout the week. And again, in terms of what is success and what kind of topics that they were discussing.
Which,
So,
sorry,
yeah.
Ben, which kind of resources were they allowed to use to get information about success?
Anything, they have access to the internet. They have, I talk almost every day about dictionary.com, which is one of my favorite apps that I suggest to all my students to use, that they can install on their phones. So they use dictionaries, they use their class notes in other classes. Of course, they're learning strategies in the other course. So of course, all of those types of topics can be used. So I don't use any specific, the websites are so many websites I'll come across. For this particular week, I'm trying to think, there was not a very specific website that we used. But my students are always encouraged to use YouTube, to Google, or
Right.
to use various websites online to try to find
Just
keywords.
Ben, to satisfy my curiosity, do you know if anybody happened to ask somebody outside the class itself? I mean, besides classmates and you, did anybody ask another teacher or other classmates from other semesters?
I didn't bring that up only because the week before actually we had the students were asked to an interview
Okay.
people that were really close to them to
Oh,
find out how other people felt about their own strengths. That was the focus of the prior week. So students
okay.
were they all of the input, everything that they wrote about for that particular week had to come from other people. And so that was the main focus. They spent a lot of time interviewing other people for that particular week. So I didn't bring it up this week. Actually, I didn't even think about it because
All
we
right.
kind of had that as the
But
focus.
what I mean is that it would be good to find out just if you have the opportunity to ask them, just to know what kind of impact this activity and maybe the prior activity is having on them. Because if it happens that somebody actually asks somebody else, maybe they are actually going back to the prior week idea somehow by their own.
Right. No, that's a good point. And I hope that's something that they reflect in their weekly reflections. But again, it wasn't something I brought up. So
Mhm.
I would be surprised. I mean, it would be great to hear from them. I may ask them, though. I may,
Right.
um, you know, this week actually took more than any week, in fact,
Mm.
took more. I felt like I needed more time for this particular exercise. And so, looking back on it, if that was the unexpected thing, really, was how much time they really needed, again, because this was I think required a little bit more critical thinking than prior weeks. And I think that your point about finding how they connected and how they drew on the how which learning strategies they decided to talk about and how they made that decision, it would be
Right.
very important, I think, to know about. And I'll see what kind of reflections I get. And I'm planning on Monday dedicating, because we need it, probably talking about this same task, because I'm going to need to give them one more day of feedback. And so we'll see how that goes. But I'm trying as best I can to create an essential question each week, just so it doesn't draw out. 1 week seems to be pretty good to explore one good question, and so I'm trying to keep to that plan. So I don't want to get into too much of next week, and but we'll see how it goes. We'll see
Yeah.
how it goes on Monday. But basically, I wanted to share this experience. I know I kind of got into the weeds a little bit, some of the details here, but I think with task-based learning, and I really encourage everyone to share their experiences, and I'm sharing my experience not because it was a particularly great, wonderful experience. I mean, I think it was, for me personally as a teacher, it was good because it was something that we hadn't done before with this group.
Mhm.
And I find myself this semester in general really focusing more on task-based learning because of the way I've organized this semester, looking at one question per week and really trying to think of a series of activities per week based on that one central question. And it's working well for me from a planning standpoint, because I try to change each week as much as possible the types of activities to try to keep it interesting for the students, so that they're not doing the same type of thing every week. And but I find myself really focusing a lot this semester on task-based learning. And I want to share this to encourage everyone else really to try to share their own experiences with task-based learning, because what I find is that it's we can kind of conceptualize task-based learning. We can think about it abstractly, but I think until we really start sharing the specifics of it, do we really start learning the nuanced approaches that task-based learning really has, that when you're talking about a task-based learning, there are many different objectives. In my case, for example, it's not just language, but it's based on content or concepts. In this case, learning strategies. It's based also on how they connect with others in prior classes and prior experiences, how to merge and bring together different skills in the BA as well, which is what I try to do in my writing class. And so, that's the thing that I want to share with everyone. And
I still have a couple of questions. So, you mentioned this is a week that took a little bit longer in them. So I think they've been working. The work in this have been. I don't know, like struggling a little bit, or maybe taking a little bit more of time according to student space. I don't know what's the reason, but one of the questions that I have for that is how difficult was it to keep the focus during the week towards what you expected to be the outcome?
I think the focus has never been really a problem, in the sense that students know every single day I post the essential question.
Okay.
So the essential question is really the through line, or the main idea throughout the whole week, right? Mm-hmm. So they're used to hearing the essential question every day for that particular week. So the focus I didn't find was a problem. Again, I think it was a challenge trying to come up with the ideas for their writing. And I was really trying to maintain a balance when I was giving feedback, between giving them feedback on concepts and the content versus the language. Right. And of course, I have to do both. But I tried not to focus, especially at the beginning of the week, I tried not to focus too much on the grammar and the punctuation and so on. I tried to focus more on the concepts and trying to organize their ideas, and this is a common challenge for all writers from Prope to 8th semester. I would say 80% of all the feedback that I give any writing student is based on content, is based on organization. It's based on the topic sentence and having a topic sentence. And it has, little to do with grammar and punctuation. Of course, that's part of it, but most of my feedback is really trying to direct students and guide them into learning how to write more coherently, even before we even talk about subject-verb agreement or verb form or comma splices and things like that. So this was no exception, right? This was, I think, our first dive really deeply to dive into looking at their writing, but thinking really in terms of organizing their thoughts and really thinking about the words that they're using to communicate their ideas. So I think that was the biggest challenge. And I really anticipated some of that, again, with this word success being kind of an abstract term that I kind of knew that they would struggle with this, but that was really, I think, one of the main focuses that we stuck to throughout the week.
Oh, now, Ben, when you have different students, you have two groups, right? Did you work like that with both groups, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Right now, it's like around more than 30 students, maybe. I'm guessing. Yeah.
Yeah, we have like 16. I have 18 students in one class and like 16 students.
All right, a little bit more than 30, right? So you have many minds in there, and you are working with the students' thinking, and students, and that means you're working with the students' individuality. How do you handle, or how hard it is to hold your horses when somebody is going into a different direction? And how do you know that exactly that direction how do you know that you have to let him be and go ahead until he faces, or when to actually face him with the bitter truth that it's doing something wrong, or what? How do you hold your horses in that situation?
Yeah, let me give you an example, and you let me know if I'm addressing your question here. But I had one student This was on Tuesday. So Tuesday, students were still working individually on their sentences, and they weren't yet at a point where they were to work together in their paragraph. And so the students were developing their sentences, their subject plus verb plus because plus the reasons individually. And one student asked me, was this our topic sentence? And I said, well, and I knew that it was eventually going to be, but after they got together and consolidated their ideas and so on, but we weren't there yet, right? We weren't at that point in the task-based sequence, right, of what we were doing for this week. So I said, at this point, no, right? It's like I answered the question, no, it's not at this point. And then I kind of said that we'll talk about it later. But I didn't really go into it, even though she was curious and she was kind of thinking on the right track.
Okay.
I tried to hold my horses, trying to hold back a little bit and just say, wait, let's just do this, right? I have some students that really are like, oh, check my work. And they're so anxious for me to check their written work without us going through this thought process, right? I always try, especially this semester, I'm really trying to have my students go through 1 or 2 days, like Monday and Tuesday invariably, and maybe even Wednesday. There's very little writing per se. There's what I call pre-writing or writing to understand exercises where they're brainstorming, they're writing sentences, but not in a paragraph form. They're basically writing to think. They're writing to put together ideas. And students really want to rush through that process. They want to get right to the paragraph and create that first draft. So invariably, I'll find myself, telling students, okay, we're not there yet. You've given me the whole thing, but we need to back up. We need to look at, this, and this first before we get to this point. And so I found myself that there are many cases, not many, but there's several cases where, and this is usually with the stronger students, in a sense, where they're really anxious to get that first draft out and get feedback from me. But it's usually me just trying to dial them back a little bit and say, okay, let's go back, let's step back and look at this. And so I think as over time, students become accustomed to the process. And again, this is really the focus of this class, is to look at the process of writing. And, but there are, when students are at a point where I'm checking all of their drafts, my feedback is going to very much depend on the level of each student. And I typically give feedback, like I mentioned before. I'll focus more on content types of questions or errors first, or global errors first, and then I'll look on local errors. I'll depend on or focus more on local errors, which is more grammatical errors, afterwards. So that's my approach to giving feedback. And I think over time students start to get used to that. But if some students are further advanced and they're making different types of errors that are more advanced writing, then I'll address them, differently than students who are maybe at a lower level that, are making different types of mistakes. And so I just try to differentiate basically the assessment in that sense, and try to, make it clear to some students when they're not ready to hear certain things, try to make that clear in the class.
Okay. Good. Really, really interesting the way you're handling. Well, as a final aspect, I kind of detect something that it's part of my beliefs in the sense of teaching and learning. Everything that you that you bring to the classroom, whatever topic it is, whatever area, maybe language, maybe writing, maybe methodology or teaching aspects or practicum, or maybe a feedback or a reflection, anything you can think of for a classroom, for our audience. Maybe it's just plain language, English, and that's it. And in the sense, well, it's unfair to say just English and that's it, right? Because it's a wide thing. But what I mean is that any piece you select, any language selection or context you bring, I think it all can be broken down into small pieces. and as a puzzle, right? And I think we talked about this a little bit before, days before. Um, and there are different ways to bring those pieces together. Do you go through, I mean, the question is, do you have to go like step by step? Do you have to go 2 steps at a time? Do you ask students to go for the whole thing, and then once it's done, break it down into pieces? I mean, different approaches. With some of the aspects you mentioned, I already kind of sense the view of what you're doing, in this week, what you did in this week, like mostly going through the process, walking the students through the process. And I think it looks like it's heard like a good example of a task which kind of was broken into small activities during the week, in which students could take it like a little by little, step by step, breaking the pieces down a little bit to get to a whole. As you mentioned, somebody already came for the whole, the big bite, and trying to make the final outcome since the beginning. And maybe that person didn't move from that since the very beginning, but at the end he went through the process. So it's a matter of how to handle it. And it looks like not a simple task. It's not a simple task.
Yeah, and there's not one right or wrong way to do it. I think it's just a matter of sharing experiences and what works, what doesn't. I know we've talked about like listening types of activities with students, and how they how they approach those types of activities. And I'm really curious how others look at listening types of activities, how they promote listening comprehension skills, but looking at it from a task-based approach, in the sense that there are many different ways. Like, how do you pre-teach vocabulary first? How do you introduce the video, for example, or audio? But looking at the steps involved and trying different ways of really introducing language and content in some meaningful way, and seeing what works and what doesn't. But I think we can look at any of the 4 skills. If we're teaching general English, if we're teaching English for specific purposes, technical English, looking at anything that we do and finding out what works as far as the order of sequences, the sequencing of activities. This is something that we have talked a lot about. It's something that I think about a lot in my own teaching, is really trying to establish an order and a series, especially in my case on a weekly basis, but even, week to week, looking at, okay, they've developed these certain skills. Now we should take it up a notch and start doing something a little bit further advanced, and so on. But yeah, it's a complex set of, concepts here, ideas that really come to one's teaching practice. But I think it's worth mentioning, and I think it's something we'll be talking a lot more about, because I know that it relates to a lot of other things that we've talked about in the past with flipped learning and materials, and using different materials, but all under the context of how do we sequence our activities.
Yes, and I keep the idea, something that we have mentioned several times, as I guess, this wide view of the objectives and where you want to get during a course, having this awareness of how the resources and the task itself is going to lead you to certain outcomes, but not just the immediate outcomes of the day or maybe this week. As I mean, it also came a moment ago about the prior week you had with a different focus a little bit, but something that maybe already having an impact on this week itself and may have an impact on a further week. Same thing is going to happen with the brainstorming process. Maybe they're going to keep on doing this brainstorming process, or one of the aspects of one of the pieces of the puzzle of this week that may work better for each of them. Maybe that's what they're going to keep a little bit. And I think that's covering a little bit this wide view of where we want students to get as part of a course.
Yeah. And so for me, like next week, I'll try to think of something slightly different. It'll all be task-based, I think, but I think what I want to share with everyone is to encourage everyone really to look at your practice and try to mix it up a little bit, to take chances, to try something new. And try to take some risks. And I know this is easy to say, hard to do sometimes, especially depending on the type of school or type of context or situation that you find yourself in. But I really encourage everyone to share some of your experiences, either with us in our community or with your own community there, your own school system. But start sharing as much as you can some of your experiences with other educators to try to see what works, what doesn't work, and so that we can all kind of learn together some of these ways of trying to motivate our students to achieve higher outcomes.
Yes, if you are watching this after the live transmission in the on-demand format, please leave us some comments. Let us know what you think about this. Give us some guide. Sometimes we need a little bit of support also, and sometimes we need a little bit of more people tagging along in these talks just to have different views and see what else can be done about it. Ben, I think time has catch up again. Got to us, and thank you very much for the talk. Very interesting, this example of task-based learning.
Absolutely, and thank you, PD. And I want to encourage everyone too. We haven't mentioned this before, but I always include the link in Facebook. If anybody just wants to pop in and out, they don't even have to stay the whole time in our broadcast. If they just want to come in, say a few words, contribute a little bit to the conversation, we're certainly open to that. Again, we want to make this as conversational and open as possible. It's not just about us sharing our views. We're really curious about how you feel about what we're talking about. So again, feel free to come in and pop in and out of our live broadcast if you want to be part of the recording, or again, just leave comments if you wish in Facebook. But thanks a lot, Petey, and thanks everyone really for watching this recording. And again, leave us feedback. We'll see everybody next week. We'll be broadcast live every Saturday morning, and so we hope to see you in the next broadcast. Thanks, everyone.
I want to thank very quickly to the guys that joined in Facebook live transmission. I remind you, it's a secondary transmission, and you do not have the better view of it because there are a couple of things that are missed. For example, when we share screens, that cannot be seen in the Facebook transmission. So I want to thank Chio that she joins every week. Julie Castillo, Chucho Arellano, Manny Olvera, Rafa Espinosa, Fanny, Javier de Costeñito, thank you for joining for a while. Claudia Hasso, Cesar Velasquez, Tania Nain, Noemi Mora, Saraí Hasso, and maybe a couple of more that I'm missing and joining for a while. But thank you very much for watching. Rudy, also Kevin, and Rafa Espinosa, already mentioned Rafa. Thank you for joining. Please leave a comment, and thank you for staying for a while. Ben?
All right. Great. All right. Thanks, Petey. And thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Thank you. Keep on learning.